Last year I did various attempts to electrify my bicycle, and what I ended up with eventually was an e-bike that actually worked really well. It was very reliable, very efficient, and it was also quite fast. But then later that year I decided to use that equipment to build an electric scooter instead. So I took the equipment from the electric bike and then I put it onto a scooter that I also had laying around, and that became the DIY electric scooter. Now, although that scooter was quite fun, I never really liked it as much, and so a few months ago I decided to rebuild the DIY e-bike, and so that is what you're looking at right now. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, the homemade e-bike is back once again. So this version is actually a lot better than last year's version. It's more reliable, more efficient, and it is also faster. But there is one thing about this electric bicycle that I don't quite like. There is one little problem that we need to solve, and that's what we're going to do in today's video. So at this point you might be wondering what the problem is with this electric bike. Well, it all has to do with this drivetrain over here. So the way this drivetrain works is actually pretty simple. We've got a brushless motor right here, which is an outrunner motor, which means that the outside of the motor spins as the motor is turned on. And that motor is covered in a few layers of rubber, followed by a layer of sanding cloth. And as the motor runs, it then rubs on top of the tire of the bicycle, and that way it drives the wheel. And this is actually remarkably effective, and it just works really well. So the problem has nothing to do with the motor driving the wheel of the bicycle. The problem is the way this motor assembly is attached to the fork of the bike. You see, this motor is attached to this motor mount over here, and the motor mount is connected to this piece of steel over here, which is then attached to the fork of the bike. But that is done using a single 6mm bolt. And of course, as any of you might have guessed who've ever tried to attach something with a single bolt, the problem with that is that it's able to rotate. So that means that this side of the motor assembly will slowly start sinking down over time, which doesn't really affect the performance or the safety of the bicycle in any way, because it only happens so slowly. But it is quite annoying that every once in a while I have to get off the bicycle and push this thing back up into its original position. And so today we're going to do something about this. So what I have in mind is that we're going to just add a bit of steel that is going to stick out from here over the top of this fork. And that way it's going to prevent this side of the motor assembly from going down any further, because that bit of steel will be resting on top of the fork. Okay, so here we have our motor mount, and I've used this little hex key over here to record the dimensions of the piece of metal that we're going to need. So we're going to weld on a bit right here that'll stick out in this direction, and it's going to be sort of like that. So now all that we need is a bit of scrap metal that we can use for this, such as this, for instance. So what we're going to do, I think, is we're going to take this corner, because it's a nice clean corner that actually seems to be 90 degrees, unlike these corners, here and here, so it should be this long, but you know, just make it a bit longer to be sure, because too long is not an issue, too short is. and then it should be this big over there, and then ideally we want kind of a shape like this. I think that is what we need. So we have our component right here. Now all that's left to do is just to weld this piece onto this bit, just like this. Now the wise decision would be to do that using my dad's MIG welder. However, it'd be way more interesting to see if we can do this with the DIY welding machine that I made a while ago. So we're going to do that. Okay, so this stuff is probably not very important anyway, so let's just get rid of this for a second. Here we are then, the return of the homemade welding machine. Oh yes, we can now start welding. It really is that simple. With this welding machine, there is nothing you have to set up, right? There are no settings, you just turn it on. That's all there is. Okay, so as you can see, the welding is completed, and now we can put this back onto the bike, and hopefully it all fits. So as you can see, it's been installed on the bicycle, and to my surprise, it pretty much just fit in one go. I didn't have to modify it any further. It turned out to just be in the right place, which is kind of surprising given how not very accurate my measuring technique was. I guess luck was on my side today. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little update on the DIY e-bike, which is now once again ready to ride. And of course, thank you for watching.